the work that I do, and I find the stuff that you do that really connects with people always goes far beyond the physical object that you're making. You want to do this, but you feel like you don't have, work with what you have, yeah? It's that sense of just doing it now. You know, the funny thing is, there was never a point where I could say that I ever had a passion for jewelry, saying like, as a child, I will now become a jeweler. That day never came. I feel like a lot of people tend to recognize me for my greetings, the exuberance. I've been working on a brand, not so much of a brand as an artistic career that I've been developing and looking into how I can be able to bring depth into. On the physical level, I would say that I, Brian Kivuti, I'm an artist, a jeweler, particularly that's what I'm known for. But the work that I do, and I find the stuff that you do that really connects with people always goes far beyond the physical object that you're making. As an artist, you are a value sculptor of a kind, yeah? That's what you're really working with, the values that are underneath the work, the things that you're transmitting to people, that you're communicating. And I find that while on the surface level, I'm working with the jewelry that I'm making, much more recently, I've been finding myself really considering what I am making, what I'm really transmitting behind that. What as an artist I am really creating that will outlast me, that connects me to my clients, me to anyone who's watching, whether they're buying or not buying. Because I find the thing that really matters is that power, regardless of whether someone's buying or not, the fact that they can be able to resonate with what I am doing and how I'm doing it. And I can do that myself as well. You know, the funny thing is, there was never a point where I could say that I ever had a passion for jewelry, saying like, as a child, I will now become a jeweler. That day never came, yeah? Beginning first with what I actually do. Majority of my career is as a jeweler, focusing on working with silver to make unisex jewelry that often expresses deeper connections. So the work that I do tends to be a lot more sculptural, a lot more artistic. I focus on at least 90% of my work is original work by myself. And most of it tends to have either an underlying theme or something in which I want to connect myself to others, clients to ideas that are valuable to them, or some topic that I'm particularly would like to express myself over. The easiest way to consider me is as a sculptor who's making jewelry in silver, including gold and gems now. Studying in the University of Edinburgh, before I got there, you have to do a foundation course when you're doing any of the arts degrees. When you're doing a foundation course, you get exposed to multiple fields. They find like 70% of students, when they come from high school, when they're going to university, change their mind about what they want to do once they do that foundation course, once they're exposed to a larger amount of the arts, the larger field of the arts. There, when I was doing the different things, I would be going to life drawing in the downstairs corridor of the University College of the Creative Arts. And one of the routes I'd always use when I'm going to that particular life drawing class would be the jewelry department. That's where I used to pass by. It didn't really occur to me that I could be able to make jewelry, but as I passed those corridors week after week, I would find that the corridors were lined with pictures of ex-students' works, previous students' works. And one day I just stopped and I looked at them, and I used to admire them, but then it never really dawned onto me that someone makes these. And then one day I was standing there and I thought to myself, maybe I could make that. And I never really considered it as a career path. I asked the department head there, his name was Brian as well, to have a look at my work, and I asked him, you've seen enough portfolios to be able to tell if someone would make a decent jeweler simply from seeing what the portfolio is like. So I asked him to have a look at my portfolio and tell me, do you think I'd be a good jeweler? And he was like, yeah. He came and had a look and he was like, yeah, I think you would be a decent jeweler. Now the thing is, when it came to jewelry, why I chose it was not so much about passion, but as a matter of it being a really good cross-section of what my skill set is. I find that I am a naturally creative person, always have been since I was a child. And I find that my skill set of creativity easily applies to most creative fields that I go into. I do practice a little bit of photography. I've done a bit of pottery. And most of the time when I enter any new creative field, I find that I can be able to pick it up relatively easily. So I was wanting something that can be able to be a nice intersection of the various types of creative skills I have. Something that's three-dimensional, something that's a little closer to fashion if I want to pivot to fashion. If I ever want to pivot to sculpture, it's a little bit like sculpture. It's something that is a little bit more commercial. So I think it was that aspect of being able to pivot into various forms of the arts is something I really liked. The idea that I'm not so pigeonholed into one art form. I was born in Kenya, raised here in Nairobi. I schooled here up until university, where I spent time in the UK, predominantly Edinburgh, Scotland. That's where I did my degree in jewellery and silversmithing. My childhood was pretty happy, as far as I remember, though my memory tends to be pretty poor. Fond memories. There was this one time I remember as a child, I really loved Scooby-Doo. And they'd make these giant Scooby snacks, like the giant sandwiches, him and Shaggy. And then one day I turned around to my mom and I was like, hey, so what do you say about making like these? And my mom just looked at us and was like so excited about the idea of Scooby snacks, yeah? And my mom was like, do you know what? Let's go. She took us to Uchumi, that was a big supermarket at the time. We got every freaking topping you could ever think of, giant baguettes. Us with our 4 boys in the family, were all kids, were like super excited about the idea of making Scooby snacks, yeah? And my mom was excited doing that with us. It is definitely one of the warmest memories from my childhood. That and playing Stuck in the Mud and The Floor is Lava. Generally playing with my brothers. I wouldn't say I come especially from an artsy family. My father has definitely shown aspects of a developed design aesthetic. In the homes he's built, there's always been a lot of design decisions that he's made that were, in my opinion, really quite, they were quite high quality design decisions, yeah? So I feel in that respect, yes, but his whole career has been as a surveyor, and the rest of my family is pretty much in fields that are very far away from the arts. The day I realized that I wanted to set up my own thing, I think I already knew when I was younger that I wanted to do my own thing, but the day I realized that is when I was a month into employment and realizing I suck at it. Rather, I haven't done employment that much, and my employer, it was at Deldiac, that's where I had my first and only job. And then I was let go, and I was like, but no. And then they sat me down, like in Adele, and they were like, well, we actually really love you as a designer, but not as an employee. And we really love you as a person, yeah? And like they would still invite me for events and stuff like that, so we would get along really well. Even when I set up the studio, I was gifted a bunch of Ankole horn to be able to work with. So the relationship was very good. But then I realized I'm not very good at employment. I think one of the things I realized also when I started working for myself is like the hours in which I like to work are like sporadic and odd. Trying to fit into someone else's schedule is something I find quite difficult. Most of the time I want to just do what I want to do. Or if someone's giving me a very strict project briefs, most of the time I want to deviate and kind of move forth into my own direction at a whim. If I find something is cool, it's like, ooh, this direction, let's go there. That's generally what I tend to want to do. So I feel like when you are setting up or you're going out on your own, all of us look at what our advantages and the disadvantages are. Advantages and disadvantages in what our personality is like, in our skill set, in our environment and situations, in how much support we have, financial support. Do we have savings or not savings? Do we have family who can be able to support our endeavors as we're going along? Do we have backup and all these kind of things? So looking at the advantages and disadvantages I had, one of the advantages I realized is that my father was able to actually help me set up my business. So what I did is I created a business plan over the next year, basically detailing everything that I wanted to do, how much it would cost and everything else, seeking his help to be able to set up the studio, because this was quite a number of specialized equipment required. What I found is that my classmates in uni were able to easily rent studio spaces. In the UK, the arts is quite heavily funded by the government. So it's easy to be able to find jewelry spaces you can be able to rent cheaply, buy this equipment, and you can be able to come and really do what you're doing, or especially as a young jeweler. In Kenya, there really isn't that. So my advantage I found was the ability to be able to put this together. Yeah. So about a year and a half after that inception of the idea, of putting up the business plan, doing negotiations with my dad to figure out how to set this up, I was able to get this up and running. And ever since now, it's been more of a journey of learning how to do the thing. Setting up my business, the biggest challenges I've had, firstly in setting up, we're just discussing first maybe in sections of setting up and in the running. In the setting up process, I found was one, financial. Most of the equipment is quite expensive, and in this field, it tends to be quite equipment intensive. That is, certain techniques are only available when you have certain tools. Without that tool, that technique is not available, or becomes infinitely more difficult. Yeah. Then certain tools suddenly make very time-consuming processes a lot faster. A lot faster means a lot cheaper. So certain things that would take a lifetime or way too long, are much more manageable. So number one, the equipment is quite expensive, and it's quite specialized. But seeing as I came from a background having studied jewelry and silversmithing, I already knew exactly what I wanted. So as far as actually sourcing what it is that I wanted and from which store and which one is a good one and which one isn't, that wasn't the difficult part. Yeah. I think it was a matter of simply the fact that I couldn't afford it and the fact that I needed help from my parents to be able to put this together. I think that is an advantage that I'm always very grateful for. Setting up now the business, I found the biggest obstacle has actually been myself. In the process of actually working, especially as an artist, I found that how high and how low things go often directly correlates to the energy that I'm able to bring forth. Especially since I tend to come from such a creative field, often I find that when I am far more in tune with myself, these are the times when I'm able to much more radiantly express really good work into what I'm doing. Bring ideas into life, interact with people in a way where it's not just a matter of business, but really get to know them. I found that the highs and lows of my business have always gone with the highs and lows of my personal experience. So my personal experience and the way I cultivate that has always been an aspect of how well the business is doing. Yeah. So how focused I am. I think there's many different types of personalities. There's people who are very good with the minutiae of the day-to-day, as in admin and stuff like that. There's people who are not so good at it. I'm one of those. There's people who tend to be quite creative and maybe a bit more sporadic. But I find the sporadic nature of creativity is often more of a matter of someone not really having fully cultivated their own, shall we say, their spiritual approach. That is the modulation of their energy, their vibrance, that vitality in which they're able to come at things. I find that in periods where I've been really bogged down by negative thought patterns, that immediately shows in the way my work pattern is. So what I'm talking about is the idea of, we have the idea, or I used to have the idea, that as an artist you're going to be sporadic with the super high, super low, all this all the time, yeah? And you don't have that much control over it. But what I've found is actually you can be a lot more present within yourself, and get a lot more of I don't know if the word would be consistent or stable, but much more of a sustained approach. That is not saying that you're going to be working a very segmented time, but rather you'll find that the energy that you're carrying towards work is a lot more focused. Moving on from my first client being my aunt and best friend, I actually don't remember that much of the earlier days of the career. it was still a lot of like friends and friends of friends as you're getting the word around, yeah. I think I already had a reputation of being a jeweler long before I even had the studio. So I think when I did set up the studio, they were like, you have stuff, yeah? So I think when I hit the ground, there was already a bit of awareness going on. Word of mouth has always been the biggest form of how my business has grown and how I found clients. I make something for someone, they refer someone else, they talk about my work positively, and then someone new comes in from that network. And as such, the network grows. I find that I've thankfully found a lot of clients who I get along quite well with. Many of them I become friends with. As an entrepreneur, there's definitely very many mistakes I've made. Very, very, very many. Many which were inevitable, given it is either a set of circumstances and personality traits, which quite a number of them I don't regret because I feel that they took me on a particular arc of a journey where the process of failing and learning kind of brought about the necessary growth that was needed. So I feel like even if I were to go back for some of those mistakes, I feel like the way my worldview and the way I perceive certain things, the change that was necessary wouldn't have really happened had I not made those mistakes. Do you know what I mean? It's a sense that some mistakes I think are needed to happen, and so that they could be able to make room for a particular form of growth and awareness. But I think there are some certain mistakes I feel like were definitely avoidable that would have led to this business being in a much stronger position today, and my creative practice. Two that I can definitely identify are one, financial management. I've always been poor at it. I feel like I could have been a lot better at one, reinvesting back into the business and being a lot more particular about knowing what financially the business needs and really funneling back that money. I feel particularly in my 20s and in given times, I find it's very easy to move into a state where certain other things in life can be prioritized, either the social life or different things in life. I find like one aspect I found was the social life was a catch-22. Going out brought me clients, but going out would spend money that I shouldn't be spending. If I were to go back in time, I would have just been a lot stricter about how I would budget for it, saying, yes, go forth, but also this is the only amount you're allowed to spend, yeah? And being a lot more intentional. And I think that is a word that I wish I could have cultivated a lot more when it came to my finances. Intentionality. It's not a matter of cracking a whip and saying, this is what you're supposed to do and you have failed and now you are crappy at your finances. I think even when you're not that great with finances, that sense of intentionality can really dramatically change things. It changes your sense of priority. And then when it changes your sense of priority, it brings a natural pattern into place where you will notice certain things or let go of certain things and embrace certain things, especially financially. So even if you're not doing the best job, I think I would have done a hell of a lot better than I did in the past. So I think it's that sense of reinvestment, management, and prioritization, particularly in nurturing the business and really expanding it and bringing more of a balance. The second aspect was procrastination. I feel like there was many ideas that I could have brought into being that I haven't brought into being. Many pop-up markets that I could have gone to, but I was either too absorbed into my sense of maybe I'm not ready and I should have this ready and I should have that ready and I don't have enough for this, or I don't have enough equipment for this, or I don't have enough budget for this, or I need A, B, C, D, E, F, G for this project to be, and there was so many projects, so many fun things I could have done had I just gotten out of my own way, yeah? I feel particularly this year, one of the approaches I've been taking is simply as just go for it with what you have, yeah? You have a pop-up market now and you don't feel like you have enough stock, yeah? Go with the stock that you have, yeah? You want to do this but you feel like you don't have, work with what you have, yeah? It's that sense of just doing it now and doing what you can the time that you have. And if you need preparation time beforehand, you do as best as you can. And when the time is done, you accept what you have done, you take your lessons and you move forward. What's required to be a professional in this field is technical ability. And if not technical ability, at least a design sensibility. I feel one can be able to go to this field through two different routes. Either you're the business owner who is finding makers to make for you, and you're trying to figure out the designs and how the business model, and then getting the right people to produce for you. I know quite a few people who go down that route. They are not makers themselves, they don't know the technicalities, but they know how to bring a brand together. They know the design aesthetic they want to work with. They are able to come up with the pieces themselves and overlook people who are working on these things. The route that I went is having the technical ability myself and then developing things. While I came from a university background, studying jewelry and silversmithing as a bachelor's, I feel that that is not entirely necessary. If you have the access to the equipment, which is the hardest part, you can be able to get a YouTube channel, so you can be able to get people to tutor you. And I think if you can be able to get even at least the basic things and start growing from there, the basic abilities, I think you can definitely 100% learn how to be able to do this. If you're going through the technical route, then you're basically focusing on your technical ability and developing that, or your artistic ability, or combination of that. That's the route I've gone. And then from there, as a professional, I'd find that yes, you're making, but it's a lot more than that. I keep talking about the brand being more than the physical object you're creating, and being also about the value beneath it, the thing that you're communicating that sets people on fire, that makes people want to come to you. A lot of the work that you're doing on both sides of the field is figuring what that looks like for you, what it looks like to bring the thing that brings the entire business together, and how you can be able to run it and what brings people to you. My typical day generally starts at 5 in the morning. Gentle rise, usually have a half an hour meditation session. I would say I attempt to do yoga. I'm trying to be more consistent with exercise, and then I get into the studio early. My days tend to be very varied, so I'm not a consistent in the studio every day type person. Generally, on any given day, I wake up and I'll decide either the day before or on the day of what it is that I want to do that day. Whether I want to be a bit more social, a mix of that, a mix of studio work, a bit of more drawing or painting, or I want to see a gallery, or it tends to be heavily varied. I generally do not like rigid structures in my daily schedule. I tend to be a lot more fluid in the way I kind of flow. And then I fit in the various projects and demands accordingly to the day. So if the day is much more studio heavy, I'll be in the studio. If there's a lot more room, I tend to include many other things. And as the day unfolds, I usually allow the unfolding to take its place.